Okay.
Thank you. And as Jennifer mentioned earlier, we have a few suggestions for guys to make the most out of this session. So firstly, just take some notes using digital or physical books, and then please ask good questions during the Q&A session. And we're using Slido as our platform to collect the questions and prioritize them. So you guys can vote for the questions you would love to be answered throughout this event. And then we would love you to put your learnings or any thoughts and also feedback to our event. There is a Google Sheet we created on the Google Drive. So our co-host will put links into the chat box. Make sure you note that and put your thoughts onto it. And then we encourage you to connect from each other if you got the LinkedIn page. So through that in your chat box as well. Lastly, if you want to rewatch the session, we will have it recorded and upload to the YouTube channel. And Elena would put that into the chat box as well. And lastly, if you love our session and you want other people to enjoy the same thing, please help to spread the word for us. We would love to have more people coming up in the next event. Cool. And this is the way how you can join the Slido. You can either scan the QR code, or you can use the code number and type in slido.com. The third way is just to click the link in the chat box so that you can directly go onto the Slido board and put your questions there and also vote for other people's questions. Pretty simple. Okay, all the logistics is done. Now let's step into our main part. So starting from myself, I just give you guys a little background of who I am, what kind of journey I've taken so far within the in the New Zealand environment. So I also came from China as majority of you guys, but I came to New Zealand in 2016 holding a silver fern work visa. And then I took a job in my previous electronics industry as a technical sales and also account managers for about 3.5 years. I got my residency using that job title. And then I feel like electronics is very niche in New Zealand. So I didn't see myself progress further, or there's many opportunities there. That's why I was considering maybe I should change another career direction. That's how I bumped into business analysis. And I took the course at Victoria University. That is the place where I met Greg. Fortunately, he was studying in the next cohort with me, and we shared the same course. I finished the course and master's degree in 2021 in December. However, I started my first business analyst role in 2021 in August. I was quite lucky to be able to work in a full-time position earlier before my graduation. And then I have been through almost 3 jobs and in the bigger industry so far. The first one is a BA at the NZX. The second one is a BA consultant at Red Vespa. Again, Greg became my colleague at Red Vespa just 2 months before I left there. And currently, I'm a technical business analyst at Westpac. I'm a contractor right now. Outside of the work and study, I'm also a big advocate for career transitioning because I've been through this journey and I know how tough it is. That's why I started this BA career meetup, trying to help more people like me to make this journey, make this transition easier. That's why I also speak at various of BA conferences, such as the IAB in New Zealand last year. And I spoke last time about how to build your LinkedIn profile and increase your personal influence on LinkedIn. I'm also a BA blogger. I don't know how I got as much time to do all sorts of things. I opened up the Chinese social media channel and got 5,700 plus followers. Yeah, and then here I am. I started this BA meetup group and we got 300 plus members in 3 to 4 weeks. That's a great achievement. I'm pretty proud of that. Now I will pass this back to Greg to introduce himself a bit. Greg?
Okay, so thank you, Sophie, for the handover there. Yeah, so as you saw in the chat, I'm actually originally born and raised in New Zealand. So I grew up in a small town just outside of Wellington called Upper Hutt. However, my family lineage actually goes all the way back to China, originally from Guangzhou, and now we've been about 3 or 4 generations here in New Zealand. In terms of education, I've started my career, well, I originally wanted to get into international relations. So I did a degree in international relations in Japanese. I've also studied overseas in Japan, where I picked up the Japanese language proficiency test to N2, which is supposedly business level Japanese. And as you've heard, I met Sophie as well during the master's course that we did, which I graduated at the middle of 2022. So my career background is quite different because although I worked in New Zealand for a short period of time, predominantly most of my career was in Thailand and Japan. So I spent 10 plus years working over in Asia in primarily very diverse and international teams. And even when I was working in New Zealand, all of my bosses were actually Japanese as well. So I was already kind of learning about Japanese business and stuff. In international education, which also followed experiences in e-commerce and also executive recruitment as well. And yeah, look, my transition to becoming a BA was really that I came back to New Zealand at the end of 2020, 2021, right at the peak of the sort of Corona outbreak, before the vaccine had came out. And then I was just kind of a bit tired of my life in Japan and a bit homesick too. And New Zealand was quite safe as well. So I was thinking about what I wanted to do next. And I decided that it'd be cool to kind of take some of my previous experiences and shift them into the tech industry, which turns out a BA role is quite good to have, in combining all sorts of different skills and backgrounds and stuff. So my background, I actually got into industry quite early. By my end of my second trimester, I got an offer to do a summer internship at Curious, which is part of the Spark company, which is New Zealand's 5th largest organization and our largest communications provider. And that actually continued on to the end of my study as well. So I was kind of doing the Jack Ma 996 for a while, working quite a bit and studying full time at the same time. And then after graduation, I went out to market, and thankfully to, good friends like Sophie, she recommended me actually over to Westpac, which is how I got into there, which I'm now a BA consultant in the organization. And then on top, also, I don't quite know how I have the time. Like Sophie said, I'm also quite involved in a lot of New Zealand, Japan-based and also Chinese community groups. I've also helped set up and run small little events and stuff for our Victoria University Masters Alumni Group, and I've also been a part of this BA Career Meetup group too. And then on top, in my free time, I'm also training up for a charity boxing fight for mental health awareness. So got plenty of time to do things, and somehow I'll make it fit and so on and all that there. So that's enough about me, and we'll just move on to set the scene a little bit and just kind of understand what are the challenges of moving, studying, or working abroad. So I've put together a little framework, which I hope resonates with everyone, because the challenges of studying and working abroad, there's no real single one or two challenges you can think of at once, because it's a very multifaceted problem. As you can see, you're going to be impacted in different cultural ways, like the cultural differences, language, as people have already mentioned, pop culture and media, humor. It's hard to understand jokes in New Zealand, and also the lifestyle too. And then there are physical things, living in accommodations very different to Asia or other parts of the world. Our offices are a lot more different as well. Transport, we all know the train and the bus systems here aren't very good in New Zealand, or even everyday services like the banking systems or postage systems are different. Food and fashion too is all quite different. And then when you are moving to a new country, the social aspects too. You've got to meet a lot of new people all the time. It's harder to find people with common interests because things could be different in terms of hobbies and activities. And then you got to start to build your own network on top of there from scratch, which then leads to the emotional aspects, and that you've actually given up a lot to come from your home country to a new country. So you're going to be away from your old friends and family. There's a lot of culture shock that comes along that, and then the homesickness that sits in with it. So this comes into the reason why we're actually giving this talk today. Maybe just go to the next slide. Yeah, so the reason why that me and Sophie did want to have this discussion is, firstly, we want to share our experiences, because we know that it is quite challenging to work or study abroad, and we want to share how we did it or some of the things that we learned along the way. Secondly is to empower everyone. So we want to help empower you to understand some of the unique New Zealand cultural quirks, nuances, and traits. Next, inspire, obviously help change the mindset of what's possible in terms of what you could do in your career in New Zealand. And lastly, connect. So we want to build and bring a community together with CITA to help everyone achieve what's most important, greater career success. So if we move on, so this will just be a little word cloud activity about perceptions of New Zealand culture. So if you just type in the Slido quickly, what are some of the common perceptions about working in New Zealand that you've heard about or you've experienced yourself, or you might think of when you think of working in New Zealand? So I see one that sticks out right at me is tall poppy syndrome, and yes, I'm sure we can go into that later on in the chat. But if there's anyone else who has any ideas or thoughts, we'd be really happy to hear them. Work-life balance, yeah, that's a very key one. To get the first job, okay. Well, I think that's quite similar in a lot of countries. And as you chill and relaxed. Got a comment in the Zoom, acceptance to diversity, equal rights, cool. Love coffee, that is true. I even have a coffee right with me right now, just to make sure I stay awake for this talk. Hybrid working models, yep. Yep, so a lot of companies in New Zealand are doing a work from home and also in the office. Sustainability, cool. We'll just get a few more and then we'll move on to the next one. Multicultural, cool. Low wage. Well, I guess compared to some countries, yes, we don't pay as well. I'll admit that. Diversity. Limited market, small New Zealand. That's a very good one, actually. Yeah, easy getting PR. Where are we? Cool. Yeah.
Sorry, my fault.
No, that's all right, Sophie. Yeah. So from here, I can actually already gather that a lot of people have had a lot of experiences or quite a good understanding, actually. Because the next slides that I'm going to talk about will just delve into this a little bit more in detail. Oof. All right. So cool. So yeah, look, as everyone mentioned, New Zealand organizations are generally a lot more focused on work-life balance. So people do actually work to a 9 to 5 or 8 to 4 or even 7 to 3. And most people do have hobbies outside of work. So they go home, they exercise, spend time with family. And of course, as hybrid working has come up more and more, a lot of offices are being flexible around that, which then of course leads to having more relaxed working environments. So a common trait is that the pace in New Zealand is definitely a lot slower. And you do have a lot more of a friendly and sociable relationship with the people in your office, but also your customers as too. So you saw there that, we love coffee, so we like to go on coffee breaks together and stuff. There's a lot more autonomy in the workplace to do your own work. And generally speaking, there's not much overtime as well. And a lot of companies actually discourage overtime. Next thing is around sort of the smaller organization sizes. So I did some research on this, and I actually found out that companies that have over 100 people or more in New Zealand is less than 0.5%. So you imagine that that's only 2,500 businesses in the whole country have more than 100 people. Not talking thousands, not talking tens of thousands, I'm talking 100 people. So I did a little more research, and it is true, because like even companies like Xero, which is like one of our largest tech companies in New Zealand, that's only about 1,500 people based locally, and their international offices are much larger. Or even a company like TradeMe, which I believe we have some people here who might be working there. That's New Zealand's largest e-commerce company, but it's no more than about 600 people working around there. So what this means is that your team sizes are going to be smaller, and also on top, you may be wearing multiple hats or having extra responsibilities during your day-to-day roles. Next thing too, as someone mentioned too, about having a smaller economy, which is true. And the smaller economy means that we also have a lesser reliance on technology or also processes, because we, not we, but the New Zealand market generally lacks capital to be able to invest in constant upgrades, unlike overseas in their technology stacks. So I've heard even too from some of my former directors in Spark, they've said that New Zealand's potentially 10 years behind in terms of a lot of like digital and technological capabilities. And if you've worked in government or you've worked in even some of the private sector, you'll know it's pretty bad at times, and people still use Excel and stuff and so on and so forth. And then secondly, just because of the size of the organizations, a lot of processes are not very mature either, because we rely a lot more on our people, and then they have all the answers in their heads to solve all the problems, right? So there will be a lot of workaround processes or ad hoc processes or things that will just constantly keep changing depending on who's in the organization. But the flip side to this, it means that the most, our strength is actually within our resources. So we have a lot of smart and innovative people who take a hands-on approach to solving things. And the general way that we do like to solve things is taking a collaborative approach and consulting with each other, working together, and then bringing a lot of diverse opinions and ideas to solve problems and so on. But the interesting thing is that at the end of the day, though, we are still very productivity and results focused. So deadlines are still going to be deadlines, and clients will still get angry at you if you are late on a project or something like that. And people do expect stuff to get done on time with a very can-do attitude. So, when it's busy, it is busy, but generally outside of those times, it's pretty relaxed in terms of the working place. Moving on to the next one, which we'll be talking a bit more about communication and decision-making. Business meetings generally have a lot less structure and formalities, and they're a lot more friendly. So you often start more with social chit-chat, like me and Sophie went to meet someone actually on Tuesday, and I think we spent about 20 minutes out of 30 minutes just talking about life before we talked about business. And then I spent another 20 minutes afterwards talking with him about everything else. Next thing is direct communication. People here are quite open to speak their minds, or they'll talk to you directly about how they feel about things. And it doesn't matter if you're junior or senior, you're allowed to speak up, and you're also allowed to share your opinions, because we have a much more lower hierarchy structure compared to a lot of other countries, which is basically because of it's a smaller organization size. So the organizations are much more flatter. You have less layers, and you have more opportunities to interact with the whole company. And that even includes your CEO if you're living in or working in a smaller company, because they could just be like the opposite desk to you or something like that. Next one is around decentralized decision-making. So a lot of decisions are actually made how a project gets done or how a project is tackled is normally made at a much more lower levels and then gets checked afterwards. So quite a few of my experiences has been my boss has given me some sort of goal and then tells me to go off and do everything, figure it out, and then he'll check it afterwards as a final check and balance. And lastly, as many of you have already highlighted, slang and jargon can be quite tricky, because this is prevalent through the workplace. And you may even talk to clients and be like, oh, sweet as, yeah, I'll get that done next week. And then they'll be like, cool. So the use of slang and stuff is actually mixed a lot in New Zealand business culture too, which can be quite tricky because we don't really have such a formal language around business English here in New Zealand. And then lastly, the fun one, culture. So workplace culture, some people mentioned there's a big focus on diversity and inclusion. So everyone's very open-minded, and we have a conscious effort to respect, people's ethnicities, sexual orientation, gender, religious beliefs as well. And it's also interesting to note that in the tech industry anyway in New Zealand, it's potentially getting closer to almost 50% of all people in the tech industry here were born overseas. So that's either someone who's migrated here as a young child, or they've come over here for study, or they've moved over here purely for work. So there's a high chance that you're not only going to be working with, say, local New Zealanders, but you'll be working with people from all around the world here as well. Next one is the greater adoption of Te Reo and Te Ao Māori customs and traditions. So cool thing about New Zealand is that we are a bicultural country, which means that we were founded on this document called the Treaty of Waitangi, which is means that we respect both our Māori Indigenous rights and also on top of the traditional British Crown and so on. And in more modern days, there's been a strong effort to adopt cultural values from Te Ao Māori within organizations. So you'll notice a lot of the value and principles are going to be written in Te Reo Māori. You'll notice a lot more Te Reo Māori in the office as well. Like I've seen the Te Reo Māori version of Agile, for example. And of course, there'll be more traditional customs adopted in the workplace. All right, and then social gatherings, which are very, very, very important. So there was a survey done on a website called seek.co.nz, which is a big job hunting website in New Zealand. And they asked everyone, what's some of the most important things in a job? And number 2 came up was Friday drinks. So socializing with your colleagues is really important. You will spend a lot of time also throughout the day, maybe going to lunch, having coffee. And of course, Christmas parties are an incredibly big deal here because that's a great way to get to know each other. Next one down here, banter and humor, which again has come up a few times already. So the workplace culture here can have a lot more jokes, and people do often like to poke fun at each other a bit more. There's things like office competitions internally. You have in-jokes, or you might have regional jokes as well, or rivalries. So like you have some competition with the Auckland office or the Wellington office, or even in some cases, you can make fun of other companies and stuff too. And last one, but most not the least, being humble. So I've put a little picture there, work hard, stay humble, because in New Zealand, generally people like people who work hard and stay humble. So people who brag and stuff are not really appreciated as much, rather than those who often try and help others to achieve more together. So even in some cases, you'll find, for example, like in my previous workplace, the CEO would come out and he would just come around with beers and everyone during the Friday drink session. He says, "Oh, good job, thanks for everything," and just give you a beer. Which when you compare it to Asia, having your CEO come around and give you a drink and say, "Thank you, good job, I appreciate everything," it's quite different and so on. And then on top too, even people who are successful in organizations, you will hear them talk. They'll often praise themselves. They'll often praise their team first, and they'll often praise the people around them first, rather than their actual own individual contributions to the project or the organization. So look, that's a very high level overview of 3 critical areas of New Zealand culture. And now Sophie will be moving on to how do we apply this what are the tips and tricks that we have in applying this into the workplace?
Oh, awesome. Thanks, Greg, for the great introduction of New Zealand culture and things. So now I'm going to tap into the 3 stages of adaptation. I guess some of you may not live in New Zealand for the first time, or even live for a couple of years. However, whenever we start a new job, a new role in the company, we still need to go through a few stages of phases that you may experience different kind of challenges, and you may need to do different things to be able to fit yourself into the new environment and get along with your team, with your colleagues. So we kind of generalized those 3 different stages that you may have been through. Like personally, because I've changed quite a few jobs in the past 1.5 years as a business analyst. So I've been through those stages quite a few times. That's why I'm pretty familiar with them, and I have lots of things to share with you guys. So starting with the first stage is to when you firstly enter a new environment, you have to connect and acclimatize with the new place. So we identify this as planting and building the roots. This is typically happening in the first 3 to 6 months, typically, but some people may be faster to adapt into the new environment. Some people may be slightly slower. So that totally depends on your personality, your way of doing things, and your approach of building relationships with people. And it doesn't matter if you do it quick or not. It's just totally up to yourself, how you feel comfortable with that. And the second stage is when you feel like you have more familiarized with the space and you got some friends in the workplace and you feel more comfortable doing your stuff, you're more confident at your work. And then you just fit into the environment pretty good. However, we want you to have a bit of like a growth mindset to see where you can actually grow yourself into and maybe take a bit more like work or challenges, and then reach out to a wider team within the company, not just within your own little project team or group. Maybe you can just reach out to the other departments or even like across layers in the company. So in this phase, we normally think it will be lasting from anything from 6 months to 18 months. And the third stage is about thriving, and it's normally happening after quite a bit of time when you have been working in that workplace. So you're already very familiar with everything, all the processes, all the people, and you have good connections with your managers or maybe even senior leaders. And you might at some point thinking, what's my next step? Where should I progress my career? Should I level up to be able to do a manager work or to become a lead? And this is a place where we want to show some like thoughts and tips for you to be able to shine, to be able to thrive in your environment, to be able to stand out and really present yourself, like uplift your profile. Last but not the least, I think the ultimate goal is actually think beyond the culture, because no matter if you work in China, the States, New Zealand, or Canada, there are some commonalities between everywhere, right? Something will be, well, like beyond the culture. And if you got the gist or got the essentials of that, I think you can adapt yourself anywhere in the world and you'll become a true global citizen. And this is the ultimate goal we would love to help to achieve. And I'm also personally in this journey, I would love to become someone like that, which can actually operate across any kind of culture. All right, let's just dive into this in each of the stages and share some of our tips. The first one, connect and acclimatize. So the goal of this stage is actually just get familiar with the place as soon as you could and in the proper pace, and to understand the environment and build some initial internal connections with your colleagues. So some of the key activities are, for example, when you in your first few weeks, you might receive a lot of onboarding training. So this is a great opportunity for you actually to get to know the nitty-gritties of the companies, such as what is the business, what are the different like departments, what are the like internal processes. The simple thing, just like, for example, IT stuff, what kind of IT procedures you need to follow, what are the security policies you need to follow, or maybe in the banks like us, we need to understand all the compliances and security, cybersecurity things. We need to do heaps of trainings in the first few weeks. So get yourself familiar with those kind of things, because it is crucial for you to be able to stabilize and settle in the environment in the proper way. And also get to know your team, your stakeholders. Stakeholders means someone you will engage with, who will have impact in the work that you do. So stakeholder is a very key group of people you need to engage with. So for example, for me, I always need to work together with the project managers, our platform engineers, and service owners and tech leads, and all sorts of people, and maybe even outside of my team. And also, if you are working like in the vendor side, you may need to work together with your clients. So this is like, for example, I used to work for TransPower. So we're serving them. We are like contracting our BA services as some contract to them to help them to complete a project. So all these things, it takes some time to know about it. That will help you in the future. And secondly, you can also do is to learn office cultural norms and expectations of people, especially these ones that people don't normally speak out or speak loudly, and office lingos and slangs. So why this is important? Because sometimes, even though people don't speak it out, they do it in things in a certain way. And if you don't do that, or you kind of cross the lines or do things like in the maybe inappropriate ways, people may not tell you directly, but they probably will judge you like very silently in their hearts, you know? So it is something very sensitive and very nuanced. So what kind of unspoken rules I'm talking about here? Things could be like very simple. For example, when and while do people have lunch? Do they have lunch together? Do they have lunch, like bring their own lunch and sit in the little kitchen space? And what kind of coffee shops do they like to go? And when do people log off from work? Do they finish off there early, or do they maybe stay over quite late until 6, 7? And how do people communicate with each other? Because everyone has their own style of communicating, right? Some people enjoy like a phone call. They just drop in your Teams call from nowhere, from out of the blue. Some people would love to do that, but I personally hate that. I would love to have some heads up and some context of what are you going to talk with to me and what is the discussion about. So I would love to have some heads up at least. I don't like to be caught in the sudden call. And some people would prefer to be contacted by texting or messaging or emailing. So take some time to understand those unspoken rules. I think the best way to do that is actually to observe people, how they do things in the workplace, and you just follow those rules, right? If the people go out for a coffee at 10 o'clock, you probably can do the same thing. It won't be a huge deal. And also you can talk to individual. Like, for example, if I ask Greg, hey, Greg, what is your best way of approaching you? Do you like email or testing? So Greg maybe give me a like very direct response, sharing his preferences. Okay. And third one is familiarize yourself with the basics of New Zealand and Maori culture. I think that will be the question I would love to ask Greg. What are the basic Maori culture maybe you should be aware of in the workplace?
Yeah, it's a good question. And again, you know, my position as a non-Māori, I can only speak from my experiences. But yeah, the main thing is that there is a strong movement within New Zealand to revitalize the culture and also the language. So you will find, like I mentioned, that a lot of departments now, even in government, a lot of their wording and everything will be using either Te Reo Māori, or they'll be based on Te Ao Māori principles or Māori culture. You also might find too that your companies may offer you like Māori lessons, or you do things like waiata practice, which is singing Māori songs and stuff too, which is a great way to get involved. And then also too, even in certain situations, they may do things like what they call a karakia, which is sort of like a prayer before you have food, and someone might make a small speech and something like that in Te Reo Māori. And even too, like in the private sector as well, like I do know that a lot of organizations are promoting these things. So they might be announcing new campaigns and stuff, but a lot of the language they'll use is using elements of or using language from Māori culture. Yeah, and I guess the biggest thing that I would say is that, you know, this is the Indigenous culture of New Zealand. So the best thing is that even though it's new, it's still something you need to respect and you need to embrace in a lot of ways, because it's a part of who we are as a country.
Cool. Very good insights. Thank you for that. Yeah, I think the best way to connect is that actually learn a few of the Māori words. So you are familiar with the culture. For example, whānau is commonly used, like means family. And kia ora is definitely very common, means hello. Molena is morning. So yes, took some courses like that, or learn some basic linguals of Te Reo Māori will be really helpful in a New Zealand workplace. And the last one is to find out internal communities and groups that interest you. Take myself as example, because I'm someone who loves outdoor sports, and I always want to connect with people who love that as well, like cycling or running. So I tend to reach out to internal groups, and I found that there's no group of like those events or activities. So I just suggested to create a Strava group within NZX and invite people to join it, because I think it is a great way to kind of improve people's physical and mental health. And surprisingly, so many senior leaders, like executive level leaders, they joined that group, and they're just constantly posting all those activities, which is pretty fun. You know, you just watch out what they are doing every day, like they start cycling at 6 o'clock in the morning for 40K before they went back to work, which is pretty phenomenal. Yeah. And also we got some tips for success, and you guys can read it afterwards because it's quite a lot of content. But primarily, I would suggest you to be very curious and also research and take notes when you talk to people and trying to understand their preferences, their needs, and their interests, etc. So you can remember it easily. And also as someone new just to the office, I think it is better to be a good listener and observer rather than speaking or talking a lot about yourself or about other things. So by observing, you can uncover those unspoken rules that I just talked about. And be brave and ask good questions, because asking questions is a great way to provoke interest and spark conversations between people. And you can also invite other people to share more, like by having them to talk more, they will enjoy the conversation more, believe it or not. It is a very good trick to do. And also, if you want to really get into that environment, you can find a buddy for yourself, or maybe the company will assign you a buddy. So you guys can just collaborate with each other, partner with each other. And I believe the buddy will provide lots of insights, telling the people's personalities or characteristics and how to cope with them. So it is a great way to get into that nitty-gritty parts very quickly. And if you want to have some kind of topics with your colleagues, you can watch a little bit more of the New Zealand media, the TV, the movies, or even the YouTube videos. I mean, in these days, I never watch TVs, but I watch YouTube videos, this kind of stuff. So you have more things to talk with your colleagues. And again, find commonalities with your colleagues, what they like. Do they have pets? Do they have children? Find those commonalities. It's not that difficult, actually. And the last one is to be reliable and useful. Yeah, okay. Anything you want to add on this one, Greg? Any thoughts or stories you want to share?
I'll give you one actually about engaging with New Zealand media, but from the opposite perspective of when I lived in Japan, because one of my Japanese friends who was a quite successful salaryman and still is, he told me that I should just watch lots of Japanese TV and read lots of anime. I'll read and watch lots of anime and manga and stuff, because that's what people will talk about in the office. They'll think about the happenings and stuff. And he said that as a foreigner, if you can pick up and understand the humor and also some of the, famous people, who they are, and then also kind of flow into the conversation, people will notice that you're noticing. People will know that you like what they like, and then they'll be able to share more information about you to start building a bit of a communication channel. So that was one of the tips that I did. And then people in the office were like, "Oh, Greg, have you seen this new anime that's come out and stuff?" And they'll start sharing stuff with me and just come, say hello and stuff. So I was able to build up a good communication relationship just by knowing sort of what people were liking at the moment in terms of pop culture.
Yeah, very good tips. And I know you got to invite your colleagues from Red Vista watching some football World Cup.
Yes, so yeah.
Easily.
So my colleague from the UK, he was quite happy during the football World Cup until England lost. But before then, we used to just go sneak off. I mean, not sneak off, but we used to have work meetings down at the Old Bailey, and we just sit there and watch football and talk about life and get to know each other and stuff.
It's such a way to get to know people, very relaxed and chill way. Yeah. All right, now we move on to the second stage, which is growth and nurturing. Suppose that you have already passed the first couple of months, slide into your new role, and now you feel more comfortable and wanted to grow yourself a little bit more, and especially your presence, your voice, and you want to get involved in more activities, more events, and build like maybe deeper or long other relationships with people, and especially you do want to build the trust and credibility within or like outside of your team. So what other things you can do in this stage? I think for me, the biggest one is actually to help out in office, make yourself very useful. And you can find a lot of small wins on projects like office happenings and volunteer to do stuff. So my experience when I was working in NZX is that you don't need to wait for people to assign work to you. You don't want to wait for them. And you always want to take the initiatives to give them like some ideas of the gaps you identified, the things you can contribute on. For example, I did a couple of things when I was there. The first one is when I have a bit of time, I was reading through the project management framework. That was an 80-page document, very large, and they are due to be reviewed every year. And I found that the diagram there is not really pretty and doesn't really tell me a lot of things. It's quite messy and very old-fashioned and a lot of lines and boxes flying around. So I suggested to the PMO leader saying, hey, look, I think I'm good at diagramming and I can help to fix those problems, make those diagrams prettier and also more easier to, much easier to read. And they're more than happy for me to do that. So by that way, I actually started a kind of stream of work for myself, and I've got the chance and opportunities to set up meetings with like individual, very senior project managers to help me understand all these each steps within the project management. I actually learned so much from them by just doing that piece of work, tidy up their process diagrams within that PMO framework. And the second thing I did was that when I started work there, I found induction was not very great. There are a lot of lack of information, lack of guidance, or lack of structure. So I proposed again to the lead, actually the director, that saying, look, I think there is a piece of things missing there. I think if we provide a better induction experience to our employees, our starters, they will all have a great feeling and great experience right from the beginning, and they are more likely to stay in their roles for longer time. And he's happy with that. He was happy with that idea, and I just set off and drafted maybe 15 pages of induction guidance. And I consolidated all the feedback from various of teams, like operations team, HR team, PMO team, blah, blah, blah. So I use this as an example or as an excuse to reach out to other people and to have some like really rich conversations with them and get a lot of feedback. So you see, by those little initiatives, it's actually a very quick win, and you can really make yourself visible, and also you have the reason to reach out to people, to build connections, and actually to express your ideas, raise your voices. So just by those little simple stuff, you can actually achieve so much from it. Just really need to be very observative and to be proactive in proposing those kind of initiatives. However, make sure that you already done your own work, not just doing those stuff outside of your major tasks, right? Again, ask questions, advice, or ideas for help. I found that for a lot of Asian people, we're really hardworking. We always want to present the end result to our managers. However, sometimes we actually spend so much time trying to figure out our things by ourselves. We are so reluctant, or we feel so shy. We don't want to bother other people. But actually, this is not the best way to do things. You actually want to expose the questions, the problems early at the earlier point, and you can just reach out to your colleagues for help. It's not a problem. As long as you respect their time, you prepare for your meetings, and you actually prepare a lot of good questions to go through and actually get the information you need. So just create a kind of very professional approach to your colleagues, so that whenever you ask help for them, I think they will be more than happy to help you, because they see that you actually put efforts into it, and you respect their time, and you actually respect their expertise, right? Because whenever you ask them, they feel like, oh, I'm the expert, I'm the subject matter expert, so I can be valuable to other people. So actually you are making the other person feel really good. And just don't be shy to do that and trying to figure out things all by yourself. Okay, and again, share your work interest and motivations. Sometimes apart from work, I always like to share my little like personal stories. Like when I was working at Red Vespa, I always share my outdoor like big races. For example, 100K Oxfam trail racing with a lead of Greg, that's Stephen. And he's more than happy to talk to me about that, because he's done twice of that. See, it is very easy to actually build those connections just through some personal stories and your passion and those kind of things. Yeah, I think that touched on the fourth point, which is the shared cultural experience. What is your experience in New Zealand? What kind of things you have been through, and what kind of interesting like contrast you have discovered. And your family, where have you been to traveling during the Christmas time? They're all very good topics for like those those small talks and those banters. And I think last thing is also very big that already Greg had touched on, is internal networking. It is quite simple actually, but sometimes people just not really doing it quite often or don't spend the efforts in trying to build those relationships by just invite your colleagues for coffee. Like I always do that because we always like work in the hybrid model. I work in the office for 2 or 3 days a week. But whenever I go to the office, I make sure at least I will buy a coffee or have a coffee with one of my colleagues. So let's become a habit. Once you set up this habit, it's actually very easy. Like you can talk all kind of things with them. You can talk work, you can talk about pets, family, travel, anything that we mentioned earlier. And also Friday drinks. But if you don't like drinking like me, I probably can only drink 1 cup. It's all right. You just do whatever you can. You don't need to hang out there like for a cup of bottles or stay there chatting for 2-3 hours. It is not necessary, right? You just find your limit and you find your comfort zone. Like I always love to have a drink with my colleagues after work, sometimes just for half an hour or maybe 1 hour. I think that's good enough. You can have a bit of chilling and like casual talking. And it just feel like whenever you want to stop, you stop. Just be kind and be truthful and be honest with yourself. You don't need to push yourself to be like offering too much or making huge efforts. Yeah, and I would love to have Greg to share some your tips. Like what have you been doing, for example, in terms of these activities and helped you in this grow in this period, in this stage?
Yeah. Like things around work interests and motivations, as Sophie said, is really important. Like I told some people in my company I was going to do this boxing thing, and lo and behold, one of our very senior people in the organization said, "Oh, I've done that before. Let's come talk about it afterwards." And then we had a good chat about it for 5 minutes. And she introduced me to a few people that she knew and stuff, and she's been giving me a few tips here and there, and so on. And on the other hand, too, around cultural experiences. One thing that I found is that, New Zealanders also, well, now that the borders are open, do like to travel around the world as well. So one of our head of operations, actually, she said that she was going to plan a trip to Vietnam. And I've been to Vietnam about 4 or 5 times, and I have quite a nice little social network there. So I was giving her some tips and advice and telling her that, oh, if you go to this city, I'll introduce you to my friend and stuff. They've studied in New Zealand with me. They'll take you around. So I've just earned a whole bunch of goodwill and kindness from just being kind and, wanting to help her out. But I've also just strengthened that relationship from I'm not just a worker with her, I'm also becoming a little bit more of like a closer associate or even friend to a degree. And then that she'll remember that there when she thinks about me going forward in the future. I could go on for ages about this, but I'll keep quiet for the sake of time. So yeah.
No worries. I do have another question because you're currently working as a consultant. So you're working at the client space. So what is your kind of strategy of building relationships with your client side rather than your coworkers, like in the office, your own company?
Same again, really, as I would do internally, but you might only do things online or only in the meetings. Normally, I just try and actually understand who they are as people and a little bit about them, and kind of understand their world first before I kind of go in and advising and telling them what to do, because nobody likes that. So like in one case, I worked with a local council in quite a small town, right? And rather than us saying that we know best because we're, from Wellington and we're, the big city and we'll tell you how to do things, we just kind of got to know them and their team more as people and so on, understood their problems and understood what they really wanted to do, and then advised them more based on that there. Because I found that, if you can't appreciate someone's world or you can't appreciate the challenges that they're facing from the way that they're dealing with it based on their resources and constraints, you're not really going to provide them good advice, and they're not really going to appreciate what you tell them to do or what you suggest to them as a solution.
Cool. Great tips. Thank you, Greg. And we also summarized a bit of like tips for success in this stage. Again, be open and share your own experience and show gratitude to people who helped you out throughout your kind of journey of adaptation. And also, I think one key thing that I feel like I resonate most is to be authentic, to be yourself. You don't need to pretend to be someone if you're a very introvert and you don't love those kind of social events or activities. yeah, just don't push yourself too much. However, what you can do is to show your genuine interest, to find a way that you feel comfortable with. So if you are not so kind of comfortable in a big group of gatherings or social events, and you are more comfortable with like one-on-one chatting, that's all good. You just invite your colleagues for like one-on-one chat, or have maybe a deeper conversation that suits you better. Just to find a way that suits you the best, rather than kind of to trick yourself to the things that you don't really want to, because that don't last, that's not sustainable. And again, make yourself useful, find those great opportunities that you can add some contribution, and you can actually utilize your capabilities that hasn't been fully utilized. Yeah. Sometimes remember a little bit of the key facts or stories about people will be quite useful. For example, I invited the general manager from NZX the other day for coffee, and I just ordered his favorite coffee flavor, which is the long black. And he was quite surprised because it's been a year I left the company and I still remembered what kind of coffee he enjoyed. So I think those little things can really help people to, yeah, like to have a good relationship with you and like just like you, right? So everyone wants like kind of feelings to be remembered, their preferences. And the third stage is thriving. Thriving is probably one of the trickier parts if you really want to step up and be maybe a lead in your company and have increase your presence or increase your kind of influences as well. And sometimes you need to really stretch yourself a little bit from your comfort zone, because you need to develop some new skills that probably not really that common in your previous work as an individual contributor or things like that. So you also need to kind of do a little bit more like network upwards for more opportunities to present yourself, to ask for promotions. This kind of things is not easy, but it is much achievable if you kind of listen to this talk. The firstly is to raise your voice and present your work. So normally we are aware, like as an individual contributor, you probably not get involved in a lot of those senior meetings. But I did something that quite often is that once I discover there's a meeting that I'm interested in, for example, talking about strategies or how they prioritize the projects, I would just ask, who is organizing that meeting? Can I be part of it? I can just be there and listening, and maybe occasionally ask one or two questions. So in that way, I can understand how the company is operating and how the decision makers are actually making those decisions, what kind of metrics or like criteria they are using. And also find those opportunities where you can present your work. This has been enlightened by one of my colleagues. He used to be the product manager in the capital market. And I was kind of in the process of building up kind of a framework or a process of actually gathering requirements, because that was not something properly done within the organization. And I did this in the slide pack. He read that, I presented to him. He thinking, oh, this is brilliant. You should present this to like a broader, a bigger forum. Then he invited me to his kind of group, the steering meeting, where all the CTOs and executive board members, those kind of senior leadership are there, leaders are there. And I was quite nervous for that meeting, but I think I did it well because I prepared a lot. And so my emphasis is here, like if you have done a great piece of work, make sure you have the channel to present it, especially to those senior leaders, because sometimes these things, its work can be actually quite impactful and quite useful for a wide organization. However, if you don't get it across and you don't highlight it in like the higher management team, people will not be aware of it, and maybe the impact you could have achieved won't be achieved. So make sure this is not bragging, and this has nothing to do with the humble. This is like trying to maximize your impact and your value to the company, right? So don't be shy to do that, and make sure you raise your voice and raise your profile by delivering excellent work. I think the work will speak for yourself rather than you speak for yourself. And then I'm also a big advocate on sharing. I think sharing can actually really, you can have so many good ideas by just listening to other people's talking and sharing those project and skills. So I'm also like enjoying sharing my own learnings with a wider audience and wider group. and also successful stories. So I have personally done quite a few trainings, internal sharings in terms of the business writing workshops I did the other day in August last year. So I did this 4-day training and I learned a lot of bunch of like tips and tricks on how to build up a great business document and how to write it more effectively. So I shared this session internally with my client, which is Transpower, and also within Red Whisper. So I did it twice. Another one it was with my colleague. And I think it is a great way to kind of practice my own learnings and deepen my own learnings, and also help other people who may want to improve their skills as well. So by doing that, you're helping yourself and other people. I think it is a great way to kind of build your relationships and upskill yourself. Again, it's quite difficult to kind of stand out in some big corporates. However, you can actually specialize and communicate your strengths, your unique strengths. It could be things like you get certified for yourself. For example, I was certified for Salesforce, and I always promote that because that was not a common skills within, for example, Red Whisper as a consulting company. So whenever there's an opportunity coming up, I might be selected as the consultant to be assigned to the customer side. So make sure you have all those kind of skills and certifications and market yourself. Let people know about it and how you can do about it. Right. And next one I want to talk about is the build relationships across all levels. Find yourself a mentor or a sponsor within an organization who ideally will be someone in their senior leadership team. So this is a great way that you can network up with, because one of the job responsibilities of all these leaders is actually to build or to cultivate the leadership within their team and to discover talents and help them to kind of embark on the leadership journey. So this is actually their work to mentor you, to help you grow. So don't be shy with that, even though your company may not have a formal program of sponsoring or mentoring, but you can just reach out to people you feel close to, you can trust them, and you want to become them in the future. So just reach out. I personally did that. I just asked an executive saying, hey, I think I really have resonated with your background as a sales guy, and can you be my mentor? And he's more than happy to do that. Just buy a cup of coffee and it's done. And here I want to ask Greg, do you have any tips, like how do you kind of network with the senior leaders, especially the C-suite, because you have been like the senior recruitment consultant before, so you must have a lot of things to share.
Yeah, I think that the main thing is understanding their pain points, because if they have so many things going on in life, like, you know, I remember one time as a bit of a session that I had with my old director at Spark, he showed me his calendar and it was like 90% full and it was only a Monday. So if you understand his lifestyle and where you can add value to him for the challenges, that's a good way that he'll understand that you're listening, or he or she will understand that you're listening, and then someone that he can spend time with and he'll make time for you. So it took me a while at the start because I didn't really understand how busy he was, nor that he was on like 10 different projects all at once. And once I started realizing that, I would start asking him like, hey, I know you've got that other project going on. Do you want me to do anything for you? I have some free time. And he's like, oh my gosh, you're giving me extra time help. That'd be great. Come do this for me. Or for example, I was able to show him some of the work that I was creating for, like, we ended up using it for various different government agencies, and it got recycled across a few different projects. So from there, he's able to start to see my own development and growth as well. And then he was able to put me on and be more comfortable and move me up into doing bigger projects as well. So it might start from small things, but the first thing was always appreciating that, you know, these people are busy. They have so many other things going on, and you are one of many things that that they're responsible for. But if you can find a way that adds value to what they're doing and what they want to do, then you're going to be appreciated a lot more, and then they'll give you stuff that will help you grow in your own career pathway.
Yeah, I totally agree. Sometimes it's just start from a little opportunity, and then it will just like a snowball effect, right? Because you got the credibility and trust there. So they are more than happy to give you more chances and more opportunity to try bigger stuff. And that's how things started. And I think that leads to the next point, which is step up for challenging work and also connect with external communities. Like if you want to maximize your influence, you probably want to build your presence, not just within your company, but also with the industry. I think that was what I was doing last year. Just I was accidentally being invited to a IB New Zealand talk. So I select a topic of how to support, grow, and retain the new business analyst with another colleague, another classmate of mine. And we actually presented to over 250 people online. It was an online webinar. And I was shocked by the scale of it. I was never expecting I would do a talk like that. However, it was so successful. So afterwards, we got more opportunities of speaking and talking. And we're going to present again in another event that the same people organized. So you can see that it's all start from the little things, but you can actually go very, very long if you take it seriously and put a lot of efforts into it. Again, tips for success, you guys can read it afterwards. I can emphasize this more. Take initiatives, be proactive, find yourself opportunities, not to be limited by your own job descriptions, your roles or your positions. You don't really need a title to be a leader. Just remember that. You don't need a title to do things. You can just do it yourself. As long as you can make it reasonable and you can get your supporters to be your back, and you get off to go. You just do whatever you think is valuable and is right and making contributions to the company. Yeah, just be comfortable with that, standing out and stepping up. Network upwards, we have talked about that, so I won't repeat again. And I think treat coworkers as people is the next thing I want to talk about, which is the beyond the culture thing. And again, be relaxed, be chill. Don't be too serious about things, because sometimes if you take things too seriously, that will make things worse and will make things like more tough for yourself and for other people. All right. Last thing is think beyond the culture. I'll quickly touch on this. However, this is kind of can treat it as life principles, not just limited to New Zealand workplace, but actually applied in your personal life, in your work, a lot of decision makings, right? So we would love to encourage you to understand things from the human being level, across like beyond the culture. Like always think, what does everyone want? Taking yourself as example, what do you want? If you want something, a larger chance that other people will want it as well, right? And by thinking, having those mindset, it can bring your relationships actually to the next level. So what are the common things that people may want all the time? Is that people want to be respected. No one don't want to be respected. I can say that. And people want to have recognitions for their great work. If you have done something really excellent, you want someone to pick that out and speak up for them. And then everyone has their own motivations, spoken or unspoken. So if you are able to discover other people's motivations, you are more than like have a larger chance to be able to collaborate with them much better and get what you want out of them by understanding their motivations. And then people want to be treated fairly, no matter what is our age, our gender, our position. Even we have no titles like managers in our titles, and we want to be treated fairly, right? We have put a lot of efforts, we want recognitions, we want equal opportunities, and we want equal pay, just simple as that. And also I believe no one wants to be micromanaged. So we all want to work autonomously. We want to be able to manage our workplace and split our task for daily work more freely. And also people want to be inspired and empowered rather than to be told what they need to do, right? So by that way, people will have actually more motivations and putting more efforts into their work. So what's the implications for us, right? If people want these things, and if you can give that to them, I think you are much more closer to success, to build a long-lasting relationships, not just the shallow ones. Once you leave the workplace, people will not remember you or will not talk to you again. That is not a long-lasting relationship. You really want to have that kind of people whenever you haven't, like for years you didn't talk to them, but whenever you need them or when you touch base with them, they won't have to have a coffee with you or even back up you or even support you. That is called deep relationship, because you have something like really like groundedly rooted. So what's the tips for success is to treat other people as human beings. Don't emphasize on their titles, social status, gender, nationality, those kind of labels. Those are the social labels. Rip off those labels, and in end of the day, they're still human beings. They have their ups and downs. They have their emotions. Just treat them as a person rather than someone like the director or a CEO or whatever. These are just titles, right? And then treat everyone equally. This is derived from the first point. If you treat everyone as a person, you will be more than able to treat them equally. Right? You don't like kind of have a face for your managers or leaders and have another face for your co-workers who are at the same level with you, or someone in the study in the university. That will make people very uncomfortable and think like you're someone just use different approaches due to different levels. That is not something you want to do. And then I want to emphasize on this is the first give, then take. Because if you're always a needy person, you're always asking stuff from others, you're more likely to be rejected or declined, or people won't want to deal with you for too much time or for longer. However, if you discover what other side needs and what is their motivation, and you help them to achieve what they want, and you give your efforts, your heart and your sweat and blood, and I'm sure in the return, they will be able to help you when you need them. And even they don't help you, probably they're not a good friend they need to build a relationship with. So that's kind of judgment or criteria you can use here. And again, put yourself in other people's shoes, like you just understand other person's perspectives. And always ask yourself a question: why should someone space you? It could be anything, like why should the other person answer your question? Why should they help you? Why should they spend time with you? Why should they hire you? And these are critical questions you need to ask yourself all the time, no matter where you work or no matter what you do, right? If you want to achieve your goals and if you want to get something from the other person, try to understand them, try to understand the other side of the table. It will help you to be more successful of getting what you want. All right, I think we have spent enough time. Maybe quickly go through the taboos and then we will jump into the Q&A. Greg?
Yeah. These are taboos that are generally no-nos, if you will, in the New Zealand workplace. Now, a lot of these are similar to other parts of the world, like we don't really tolerate harassment, discrimination or bullying in the workplace. And of course, things like gossip and negativity as well. Either saying things about people in the office that are bad or posting up things on your company and social media, definitely no-nos. But there's also some interesting things as well. Like there is something around personal space and personal boundaries in New Zealand because, in some cultures you're allowed to come up very close while someone's working, whereas in New Zealand, people do like to have a bit of space unless you really know them. And then of course, because we are living and working in a multicultural society, some people may have different cultural or religious or ethnic beliefs and stuff. And you just, let them be and that's who they are and so on. Number 4 is an interesting one too, asking people for social outings. Now, I'm not talking about like going out for coffee or for lunch during the day. There is a little bit of carefulness you need to have in, say, asking a colleague out for dinner, because it might be interpreted as like a romantic interest, or it could come across in a very negative way. Number 5, as we talked about a bit, around bragging and talking yourself up. It's often better to stay humble, and as Sophie mentioned, let other people speak good things about you instead. And lastly, talking openly about salary and or money and stuff. Again, it's connected somewhat to being seen as a bit braggy, but also that it's just generally a sensitive topic, and we don't really share that there as often as other countries, or have a bigger focus on it as well in New Zealand. So they're just the main things there. And then some additional tips too is this is something that you could be doing anywhere in the world, but what I found is that when you are migrating to a new country or working in a new environment, it's very common that you start to compare things to home and like, oh, well, in my country, it's like this. Why is it so slow here? Because this kind of attitude and behavior doesn't come across very well anywhere. And it makes you seem as a little bit like not being appreciative of what you do have, because, every country has its good things and bad things. And yeah, it just doesn't come across very good. And it's equally important too, because like New Zealand's small, and everyone knows everyone. Like I literally ran into 2 people in the core here, in this very core, on Monday night, at a kebab place in Wellington, for example. So you're going to run into people quite often, and you're going to like meet them again in your professional careers. So it's really important to focus and maintain the 4 R's, which I call your relationships with people, your reputation as a person, your reliability and showing up and doing what you say you will, and then of course providing the result afterwards in the workplace, because these are critical in ensuring success in your career in the long term. And if you start to get to the point where you leave lots of organizations and burn bridges, you're going to start damaging your reputation and your relationships, and people will talk. People know who are the ones who you don't want to hire or you don't want to work. And likewise, again, if you've got issues with your ability to perform in the workplace, people will know and people will find out, because it's so small and so interconnected here that unlike other markets, there's a lot less places to hide. So you do have to get along with everyone and do the best you can in every opportunity that you get. Cool. So yeah, Sophie, that's the taboos done. So I think we have a special announcement which you'd like to go into.
Yeah, I can go into this. So as I mentioned earlier, me and Greg will present at the Capabilitydrive Development Day on 31st of March this year. Our topic will be how to ask good questions. As this conference is targeting at product owners and business analysts, we think this is a crucial skills that every BA and PO should have. That's why we organized this 1.5 hours workshop. And actually, we got a lot of more speakers over there talking about all sorts of stuff. You can have a quick look here. And if you're interested, we'll put the link in the chat box. And I have applied a discount code for this special group. And you can use this code to get a 20% discount on purchasing the tickets. So we would love to see you guys over at that event in the end of March. And I'm sure you again learn a lot from that session and to be able to engage with us, which engage of like a wide audience of POs and BAs in the space. Yeah, make some connections and practice our tips today. Okay, and this is our next event, which will be coming up in the 3rd of March in 8 to 9. We will invite two organizers of that event to us to talk to us about their career journeys and also nitty-gritties of business analyst career. So welcome to join us in the 3rd of March. Yeah, now let's step into the Q&A. Sorry, guys, we haven't really done a great time management, but if you are able to hand over for a little bit longer, we're more than happy to answer a few more questions. So yeah, let's step into this. Jennifer, do you want to read out the questions?
Yeah, sure, my pleasure. So thank you very much for switching to the Slido. Yes, I can see that. So we've got the first question: how to start a small chat, how to ask for a coffee chat politely, and how to find a mentor. So this is the question with the most votes. So Sophie or Greg, who will answer this question?
Maybe Greg. I've been talking too much.
But I probably talk too much too, especially with small chats. Yeah, I think the first rule about small chat is start with a common topic, because at least you can say, hi, you know, this is my name and this is the role that I do in the company. What do you do? And just get to know each other for a little bit about work and stuff and understand each other's role. And then you can start to build outwards in stages. So rather than asking someone like, how much money do you make? Which obviously is a no-no and will scare people. You could come along with more like, you know, what do you do? What's your role? Cool, great. Oh, are you from, you know, what part of New Zealand are you from? Or where are you from overseas? Oh, really? And then to start building down some very kind of casual conversation. And then as you find more commonalities, which could be like, in my case, you know, I found out that one of my colleagues likes video games. So I ask him, oh, I like video games. You like video games. What video games do you like? And then you start building up conversations that way. So the idea is that you actually really start small with the common topics and then find things that you have in common with each other and then expand on them. Because the interesting thing around small chat is that it can lead to very long-term, life-changing, you know, conversations with people in some cases, because you build these really strong relationships, right? So start small and then find the commonalities and then build from there. Second, again, how to ask people for a coffee chat politely. First reason is think about why do you want to have coffee with them? Because without an agenda or a reason, it's kind of a bit meaningless unless they were friends or something like that there with you. So think about why you want to have a chat with them. It could be around getting industry knowledge or understanding the business better, or it could be around even just wanting to connect up about an idea that you have potentially. But if you are going to do that, then you're best to have a really kind of clear, concrete idea that you can share with them, and they're also interested in hearing about it. And lastly, finding a mentor. Again, it's similar to the coffee chat situation in that you want to know why you need a mentor, and also who would be the best person who can share the information that you have. And then it's just, I guess, trying to see if they're actually interested by asking them really and explaining your case and explaining that why you want to learn this area and stuff. Because mentoring, I've done a little bit myself. It is very time consuming for the other person. And, it's a bit of an investment on their end. So if you are going to ask someone, make sure you have a clear reason why, what you want to get out of it, and then what you can contribute back to them as well. Maybe by helping them out on a project for it, or maybe you'll be able to share their information and help spread their message around the organization.
Yeah, I want to add one on top of that, Greg, is that my approach will be quite more direct. I will just ask them out. Hey, do you want a coffee with me? Just say directly. And then there is another case that I invited your lead, Stephen, out for a lunch. He asked me, why do you ask me for a lunch together? I say, because I like you. I want to talk with you. You just express your likeness to them and they will be flattered, to be honest. It's that easy, okay? Just do it. Say it.
It really depends on different personalities. For Sophie, I think Sophie is really outgoing and you are very attractive. I think the people will be likely to accept the invitation. Yeah, I'm not saying, Greg, you are not attractive. You're also attractive. We'll move on to the second question.
I'll hide my face from that one.
So we've got a fellow come from China. So the question is, the biggest challenge for me will be I can't understand their jokes. So we kind of like attach the jokes in the presentation. So if Greg, maybe not Sophie, you can just, elaborate on this. Where can we learn the New Zealand jokes?
Yeah, that must be Greg's question, not mine.
Well, I thought you're probably more Kiwi than me now, Sophie. You should answer that one there. Yeah, again, it comes from engaging with the culture. Like, if I was to think about, if I went to China, there would be so many things that I wouldn't understand about the different cultural nuances of even a specific area until I actually go out and talk to people, get into the local community and ask people to explain things to me. Because a lot of the stuff that happens in New Zealand, it doesn't happen in any other place in the world because we're a bit more isolated and we don't have as much more international or global influence. So our local culture is quite strong compared to, say, like Europe, where you have a lot more people coming in from different parts of the world, or even in, big cities in Asia and stuff, where it become a lot more diverse and multicultural and stuff too. So the first thing that I could say is definitely, as Sophie mentioned, kind of in the initial phase of like, connecting and doing your research, you might need to just find ways that you can connect a lot more with the culture and get to know and talk to people from New Zealand, and then ask them questions and say, hey, why do you joke about this? Or why do people in Wellington make fun of people from Auckland? Or why do we make fun of Australians? And then they'll tell you. And then, if everyone's laughing too, the best thing to do is just laugh along, because it's how you fit in, and then people you'll start to pick up a little bit more as well as the language and so on. And then lastly too, just around media, because there's so much content now out there, New Zealand movies, New Zealand music, and so on. And if you start to pick up and watch some of those, you'll start to see why people find things funny, or certain reasons that stuff can be seen more humorous than others. I mean, I do get it though, because also New Zealand humor is a bit weird and a lot of sarcasm and, can be a bit dark at times as well. So it is tricky, but I guess if you don't start somewhere, and if you don't start connecting yourself to the culture, you won't get any better in the situation that you're in now.
Very good questions. Yeah, and also really good answers. We've got 2 minutes left. I think we'll cover the questions as much as we can. Also, It's
I think Jennifer's stuck. Next question will be, it seems that people love stereotyping other races, but they keep saying diversity and inclusion is important.
in workplace.
Let's really
It's kind of like advocating and what people are actually doing at the workplace. Do you feel the same?
yeah, I think this is a really
Sophie or
interesting.
Greg?
Yeah, I'm happy to take this first. I think this is a really interesting question because that's actually the case in a lot of places. Like people, that's why I'm saying there are a lot of hidden rules, right? People don't speak about it. What they do and what they think is sometimes quite different. I think the way that how you can deal with this is trying to cultivate a culture and do initiatives that can actually lead into a more diverse and inclusive workplace. There is a saying that to be able to get rid of the weeds in the garden, it just plant more vegetables or more plants, right? So they will take the space and take up the space for the weeds to grow. And what you can do is also to encourage more diversity by doing what? You can speak up if you think there is maybe a not very equal way of treating people, you need to raise it up. Or if you are like untreated because you're just like another race or another ethnicity, you just need to highlight this, because the first step is to raise awareness, right? And you can also partner with other people, especially if you got a mentor in your organization and you got someone who has power and who has interest to knowing these things to help you out, to support you. And you can reach out to them, saying, have a private conversation with them, expressing your concerns, because this is something actually can damage the workplace culture, and it can ultimately damage the organization's reputation and a lot of stuff. So they should care about it if this is the case. So what you do is that you need to rectify by actioning on it, by speaking up, by doing stuff, rather than waiting someone to get it sorted. It's not the right way to do. Greg, any comments on this?
Yeah, probably just following up what Sophie said. You know, if you don't speak up yourself, it won't change. So if you're not going to be one to say, this is not right, or I'm not comfortable in these kinds of situations and I deserve to be treated better. I mean, people here will just do what they do, because sometimes too that I have found in New Zealand is that a lot of people here may not be as well traveled as, say, us. So some of their positions do also come from a point of either ignorance or they just don't know any better. Like, look, I come from a small town in New Zealand myself, and it's like less than 40,000 people. And some of my high school friends have never actually left the country before. So if you're working with people like that, they're kind of putting, you know, wearing their shoes. They just don't know any better. Not to say that it's right, but then it's an opportunity for you to educate them and say, well, actually, you know, we are people, you know, we're here to work together, and I want to have a good relationship with you, and propose it to them that way. Because otherwise some people just won't know any better. And, you know, a lot of the times in New Zealand, I think that comes into a little bit around the banter and humor. We do play around on stereotypes a little bit too much, especially around race or locations. Like people say, oh, Greg, you're from Upper Hutt, your family must be poor. And I'm like, well, actually they are pretty okay over there and stuff. And, you know, it's a reality. So if I can say that, well, no, this is who I am and this is what I believe and stand for, well, they're not going to know and they're not going to change. So it's a two-way street, you know, and I think you should treat it that way. But do what you have to do is the most important thing.
Yeah, I think we are running out of time. Maybe we just choose from the remaining questions, pick one or two,
maybe
and then we can wrap this up.
Two more questions, maybe, yeah.
Two more questions.
Yeah.
Yes. Who will be the lucky one?
Oh,
can you please recommend?
That question of making friends at work, that's quite interesting.
Yeah, how about that, Greg? You choose one and I choose one, then we can close this off.
Yeah, you have to say.
I'll do the work one.
This one?
You can do the
making friends?
Yeah,
you go for it.
Yeah.
Greg.
I think making friends at work, it's an interesting topic because, you know, ultimately you're not there to work to make friends, if that makes sense. So I've always found that firstly, you got to work well together, and it's always been a plus and a benefit if I can get along with everyone afterwards. And normally they go hand in hand. But, you know, in saying that, if you might have to reach it, you know, you mentioned there being an introvert isn't helpful, I guess. And yes, it does make it more difficult, but that's okay, because there are other activities you could do that you don't have to be such an extrovert or go out to drinks all the time and stuff. And you will find there are other people in the office you might be keen to have just like, you know, a little group chat or something like that. And you can kind of share your ideas or share some jokes or stuff. Or you can find ways that you can communicate with people without having to be so, you know, what's the word, extroverted or really active within the workplace and so on. Another thing too is just looking at finding commonalities and finding common interests with people. Because again, if you're not willing to share what you like and what you're interested in, well, how else is someone going to know what you are, you know, thinking and what you're doing and what you like? And they won't be able to share with you either, because they're probably thinking the same thing. Like, I'm introverted, you're introverted, so we'll just stick in our lanes, which is one thing. But if you suddenly find a common interest, that's when you spark conversation, and that's when you're able to start sharing and communicating with each other a lot better.
Cool. Okay. How about I answer this one, because I got something to share. I'm currently, I can fully work from home. I can work remotely. So I'm happy I see there is a question about how to adapt those to current work from home, even more disconnected remote setting. I think it is a common problem right now, and I have 2 tips for that. The first one is to reach out to people at the best time point. You don't really need to stay connected with them all the time, participate in all the virtual drinks. I find it's pretty awkward. And you just find the best point to actually give them support. Just quick example. One of my team member, he sent a long messages to the Teams chat saying he's not feeling very well. He got because he used to got some concussions on his head, on his brain, and he's still recovering from that. He got migraines and he's not feeling very well. I saw that and I sent him a private message. I said, "Hey, look, his name is someone. Just use it, Greg, as example. Greg, I saw a message in your Teams, and I hope you'll recover well. However, if you don't want to share more details, that's all good. I respect that, but I really hope you can take your time to recover. And anything I can help, just reach out to me." So just by sending those simple and sincere kind of comments or messages to people when they really need it, when they have their low points, I think people really appreciate that. Even though I didn't ask for more details, he still shared with me what happened last year and why he was feeling this way at this moment. And I feel like our relationship is actually a little bit deeper, even I never met him before. So find out those kind of opportunities to reach out to people, to provide your support, to be there for them, to care for them. People will definitely appreciate that. And the second thing is that still, even though you are working from home remotely all the time, but make efforts to meet people in person. So I know that sometimes we'll still go to work or still have lunch catch-ups in the city. So try to reach out to individuals and ask them when is the next day they want to come to the office, and try to catch up with them for lunch or coffee. And I was even trying to plan a trip to Auckland at my own cost to meet my team members and also meet a wider team. So even though people are not requiring you to present in the office, just make efforts to do that. Again, be proactive, create yourself opportunities, right? It's quite crucial to have those physical contact and physical presence to your colleagues to be able to build a real relationship with them. That's my answer. Greg, anything to add?
No, just on yeah, same again. It's just saying hello and connecting with people at those crucial times for them. I even remember, like, when I worked at Spark, there was a team. My boss was always busy in Wellington, and I had a team up in Auckland. So, you know, I took the moments where we had sort of like small chit chat during our stand-ups and stuff, because, you know, we talked for 20 minutes before we actually did something about what we're doing for the week, and just get to know people from there and stuff too. And just ask them, you know, how's their weekend, or sort of what they do, and you learn things about their family and so on, or what they do in the weekends. And then the next week, I'll just repeat them. How's your kids? How's your family and everything? And it just builds up that relationship again a little bit more. And then they'll ask me questions too, like, how's your study going? Oh, you're doing well because of your masters and stuff and all that. And you just kind of keep the relationship going from strength to strength from there.
Oh, awesome. I think there are lots of other questions, but I think Elena has already posted our LinkedIn link in the chat box. So if anyone has any other questions that hasn't been covered, feel free to reach out to me or Greg or anyone. We're more than happy to have a quick chat or even have a coffee chat if you ask. Alrighty, back to Jennifer.
Yeah, awesome. Yeah. Hard to say goodbye. You know, I do enjoy the presentation. I forgot I'm the host. So we are actually running over time, 8 minutes. So thank you very much, everyone, for joining us tonight. And also thank you, our amazing presenters, speakers, Sophie and Greg. So thank you for the valuable information, your presentation, and the offers put into the presentations. I do enjoy it. I know that Sophie established the meetup group about 3 weeks ago, and now we'll have over 300 members. What achievement. Yes. So find them from the meetup, and also find Sophie, find Greg, find the meetup group from the LinkedIn too. So stay connected. Yeah. Thank you all. Have a good night. Yes.
Thank you, Jennifer.
Yeah,
thank you, everyone.
CITA. Yes.
See you next time. Bye.
See you. Bye. Have a good night.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you. Bye.